Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tracy Ficca, and I'm an educational consultant in the Patton East office. I'm also part of the Leadership Initiative. This presentation is titled Closing the Gap, Voices from the Field. It too is a 60-minute session and will be recorded. It will be made available shortly after the conclusion of the entire Leadership Summit. Just like our last session, closed captioning is available for you during all of our sessions. You can find it by clicking on that CC transcript icon on the right of your Zoom control panel, probably down at the bottom of your screen. Session information and handouts for the Leadership Summit are all available at a link on our website, and I will put it in the chat for you so that you can access it. There you go. And I'll put it in again. Across the next 2 days. It will take you to our Leadership Summit page on the Patton website. We ask that you please use the Zoom chat feature. If you happen to have any questions for either of our groups that are with us today, or if possibly you would like to share a resource that you may have that might connect to the conversations or the topics of today. Each of our school teams will first offer their presentation, and then at the end, we should have time for our teams to answer any questions that you may have that were received in the chat. And I just want to say, we all look forward to this type of a session where our peers are sharing their own experiences with us. It's useful to hear how others in our field are working to close the gap for our students with disabilities in a way that will ensure or further ensure their academic, behavior, and social needs are met. It's also helpful to hear the challenges and the successes that our other peers are experiencing, and I'm sure that's why most of you are attending this session today. We are lucky enough to have 2 teams with us today from 2 different locations, sharing how they have used innovative practices and relationship building to address student needs. Please welcome Butler Area School District, as well as Northern Potter Children's School in Seneca Highlands, IU9. We're going to begin with our presenter from Butler Area School District, Valerie Masters. Hi, Valerie. And again, we want to thank you for being here with us today. We know you started out as a team, and now you're a strong one-person team who's going to speak with us about your experiences in your school. So we're very excited to hear what you have to share with us. Thank you so much. Also, let me state that Valerie's presentation is not yet available at that Patton link for the Leadership Summit. When our presentation is over, she's going to send it forward, and we'll get it uploaded for you within a day or so. All right, thank you so much, Valerie. Take it away.
Thank you, Tracy. I am very excited to be here with everybody this afternoon. As Tracy shared, I'm with Butler Area School District, and I am a teacher at their Center Avenue Community School, which is a full-time emotional support setting. So I have been serving as a middle grades teacher at Center Avenue Community School for 4 years now, and I also serve as our PBIS building coach. We've been implementing PBIS with fidelity at all 3 tiers, and this has become a huge part of what we do and how we reach students in order to close that gap for them academically through the supports that they really need. So my role as the building coach and just another classroom teacher is to really reach out to my coworkers and my colleagues and to see where they're struggling, where their students are struggling, and how I can best help them implement effective interventions and supports for their individual students. We really looked at this in 3 key areas as we came back from the COVID-19 school closures. We first started with looking at our baseline data and progress data as the school year began. We then moved towards, as we saw student success in any form, increasing that praise, and then working to rebuild student confidence. And through this, we were able to close that academic gap. I'm going to go into each of these three components in a little bit more detail as we go through. But as I am talking and sharing some personal stories and things, please feel free to put in the chat anything that you would like to share or anything that you have questions about. In these types of a setting, it can be difficult as I can't see your faces and see your response. Use those reaction buttons and just let me know if you have thoughts or questions that you'd like me to address. So our data sources were varied throughout the building. We have a K-12 program within the building. So our students in grades K through 8 participate in the NWEA standardized testing, and we complete those tests 3 times a year. Some of the information that we get from that is extremely valuable to our teachers. There are class reports that let us see where as a group our class falls. Are they on track? Are they a little bit below grade level? Are they exceeding in some areas? And we can then break that down by student as well. I'm not sure if anyone else uses the NWEA assessment in their buildings and in their programs, but on the student profile, our teachers are able to access, and one of the things that I help them do is to pull the student profiles and really look at what these students need. Behaviorally, they may be acting out, but on their student profile, we may see that there is a skill gap, and they may have some of the core skills, and then there's a gap, and then they have some skills that are more advanced, and we're not aware of the skill gap. And by looking at those profiles and looking at those reports, our teachers were able to work as an educational team to really put in the extra supports and do some of the remedial work that our students needed in order to get back on track for their academic growth. We also used a lot of our classroom-based data sources, and that was different in every single classroom setup, what works for each teacher and each group of students, looking at things like writing samples or curriculum-based assessments, quizzes, tests, worksheets, classroom discussions, when students were working on independent on their one-to-one devices, their IXL performance, what they were completing on different apps and websites. And we tried really hard to make connections for students from what they were doing when we were learning remotely to what they were doing when we were back in the classroom. As we went through the last school year, as many of you experienced, we had students in all different pathways. We had students who were full-time in the classroom, who were in the classroom some of the days of the week, at home some days, participating via live stream every day, in quarantine, back in the classroom, all those different things. So we were trying to create some sense of consistency for students by using some of those resources on their one-to-one devices that they were using remotely as they came back to the classroom. And obviously one of the biggest data sources that we utilized were our IEP progress reports, really looking at that data, seeing which students continued to make progress when they were learning remotely and which students were struggling, and looking at the supports that were in place and how we can better get them towards those goals on an individualized basis. Our second component was increasing praise for student success. We did this in many different ways. I know at the beginning of the school year, we held a training with our teachers about maintaining a 4-to-1 praise to corrections ratio. And I had students track, or teachers track their interactions with students, both classroom wide and with individual specific students. I challenged our team of teaching staff to look at their ratio of positive praises to redirections or corrections for their entire class for one class period, as well as for what they perceived as their most challenging student for one class period a day for an entire week. And we met again at the end of that week, and I challenged them to just make an improvement. You know, they tallied how many praises to how many redirections, and then we focused on self-reflecting and how can we improve on that. We also really focused on displaying student work samples, but not only their work samples that were new from that particular moment that they were completing in the classroom, but displaying their work samples from when they had been learning remotely and showing how proud we were of the progress that they were making. We very frequently discussed areas of excellence, um, how their computer skills developed, or how their typing skills developed, or their classroom etiquette, all of those types of things. And then recognizing the student progress, not only to themselves one on one, but recognizing them in front of their peers, calling home, sending notes home to their families, walking students up to the office and letting them show the building principal something that they did very well on or something that they were proud of, and really having them take that sense of pride that we were feeling for them and all of the hard work and progress that they were putting in, and start to recognize that for themselves. Um, in addition to those two components, we also had the third component, which was to rebuild student confidence. And this really goes hand in hand with that increasing praise. But we looked at it a little bit differently at the beginning of the school year as we were recognizing some skill deficits as we were taking our data. And we started to provide assignments that were already at mastery level for those students. We were seeing so much frustration with coming back into the classroom, and so much frustration with simple things like that we expected them to remember, things like note taking and paragraph writing and reading their textbooks and finding the key information, that we were giving them opportunities to practice those skills through explicit teaching and providing them with the opportunity to 100% succeed, no opportunity for failure. We were placing things under the document camera and highlighting for the students where the key information was, so that they could then relearn the skill of picking that information out for themselves. We also increased the number of opportunities for students to teach one another, um, by doing some group projects and some research projects where students would go and learn about something and then share it with one classmate or with the full group, in order to help them recognize that they're capable of doing this and they're able to learn this material and share it with others. It really helped to rebuild their confidence in a way that allowed for them to be able to branch out into things that were a little bit more challenging for them. We also used an increase in accommodations like note-taking guides, opportunities for corrections, reteaching previously taught topics. I was working with some 8th grade students and they kept saying, "I don't understand, it was a test. Why do you keep giving it back to me?" And asking me to do it again. And we had some lessons and they turned into more of a social skills or a growth mindset lesson, but talking about the importance of, you're continuing to learn. Taking the test isn't just, okay, we're done with this topic, we're moving on, I didn't remember it, it's okay. But looking at that test and having them go back and look at their notes or sit down and talk with me or the paraprofessional in my classroom to learn where their mistake was and to understand why the answer they put was not correct and how to make it a more thorough answer. And really teaching students that getting something incorrect on a test doesn't mean you have failed in any way. It just means you need to continue to learn and continue to grow. And that's okay, because we all have those moments. And we also really worked on letting students share their success with others. I shared that on the last slide there as well, but just letting them go out and talk to other teachers or other students or office staff, anyone that they felt an emotional connection to, letting that be someone who they shared their academic success with. We really started to put the emphasis on the academic success as well as the behavioral success. So the challenge that I faced with our staff was, how do we take these skills that we have taught students behaviorally to respond to the positive prompts, to share their successes, all of those things, and turn it so that they were using those skills to continue to work through their academic struggles. And many of our classrooms spent a huge portion of the beginning of the year focusing on things like their relationships and teaching skills that the students already knew so that they could feel that success right away, teaching about growth mindset and really moving forward from there. But I want to give this opportunity. I know I have a couple of minutes left before the Northern Potter schools are going to be taking over on the presentation here. But if you have any questions or you want to share a story about anything that I shared, if you could put that into the chat so that I can address those as well. One of my challenges as the PBIS building coach was to get teachers on board with all of these things. And when you're working with a diverse group of teachers, even in a small group, as a smaller building, we have fewer teachers and fewer staff. But our building has 10 classrooms in it with a teacher and a paraprofessional in each room. And so to get the teachers on board with all three of these components, it was really all in coaching and encouraging and honestly using some of these components with the teachers as well. We do have a couple of teachers in our building who are hesitant to change their ways. They really like to do things the way that they know it works. So showing them the student success in my classroom and some of the other classrooms who are already implementing the three components and sending some of my kids to their rooms to brag and to share was really helpful in getting them on board to see the effect that these components were having on student learning. Another question, how do you deal with issues of integrity and fidelity with teachers tracking their own interaction data? That was something that I did not require teachers to talk with me about, and I talked to them in advance about how this wasn't a part of their evaluation. With me being another classroom teacher and the PBIS building coach, I reminded them and reassured them that I have no role in their evaluation as teachers. I can't tell them that they have to do anything. I can encourage them to use these tools. And then every week I offer 2 40-minute sessions in my schedule during my plan periods as PBIS building coach that teachers can schedule time to meet with me and paraprofessionals can schedule time to meet with me where we can talk about things that they're struggling with. So I gave them the opportunity to share with me privately or share with me when we met again. And we could look at the data of their interaction with students and really see if there was room for growth. And I think one of the biggest things that made it work is I wasn't monitoring it for fidelity and integrity. I was giving it to them as a tool, and presenting it that way helped them to be more open at trying it. Does that answer your question thoroughly, Deshay? No problem. Does anyone else have any questions that they would like to share with me before we move forward? I have quite a few teachers who take advantage of the opportunity. Now, as I said, with us being a smaller building, obviously I'm not using both of those time blocks every single week because that would have teachers meeting with me every other week to discuss things that they're struggling with, which just isn't realistic. But I would say an average of once to twice every 3 weeks, I have a teacher reach out to me and say, hey, do you have any coaching hours available? I'd like to touch base with you. And so then I send back dates and times that are available. I ask them for a little bit of information on what they would like to discuss so that I can prepare in advance some resources. But I'm always very mindful of not getting too much information from them in advance and not coming up with what I want to say in advance. I really try to keep our coaching hours conversational. So if they say they're having trouble setting up a positive praise system in their classroom. I'll jot down a couple of notes just on a Post-it note to take with me about things that I've used in the past or questions that I want to ask them. And I always take a notebook with me, and I try really hard to keep things very conversational with the staff in those situations, because a lot of times, as another teacher in the building, or even if you're going in as an administrator, if my building principal comes in to talk with me about these things, it's very easy to feel like, oh, well, I'm doing it wrong because they're saying I should do it this way. So I keep those things in mind as I'm talking with the staff members, and I focus on what have you tried, what has worked, what hasn't worked. Um, Tell me some more about that student. Tell me some more about what the other students are doing when that student is struggling, and those types of things. And then I always end the meeting with, okay, I'm going to take this back and I'm going to reflect on it. And by the end of the week, or if it's already on Thursday, by the end of next week, I will send you a few ideas that I have, and we can meet again to discuss it, or you can review those on your own and use what you think is going to work for you. I also make sure that I offer opportunities for something as simple as a donut or a coffee or a pop that I take with me for that teacher. At the beginning of the year, I have them fill out surveys, interest inventories of what they would like to have as teacher incentives. And I use those when I'm going to coaching hours as well, so that they see it as something casual, something where I'm coming in and I'm bringing them a Pepsi and me a Dr. Pepper, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this, and we're going to problem solve and work through it together.
Valerie, thank you for responding to that. What a great idea to offer a simple, incentive for your teachers. That's a really tremendous idea. I just wanted to say this component in particular, component 3 that you have up, also such a nice conversation, or what a nice probably thinking across a group of people to come up with these bullets. What is it our students might need as they enter the building again, and not assuming that they'd be able to pick right up where they left off, or maybe this is where some of them left off. But I'm just thinking, how many of our students have gotten away from a lot of what's expected of them, the note taking, appropriate paragraph writing, all of that, not making assumptions, but providing support. So what a really nice component this is, really well thought out, these bullets. And I was just wondering, systemically, who's part of your team? So who came up with these 3 components to start the year off last year? And I'm just talking about like positions, like what kind of folks did you have on the team? I'm sure it wasn't just you, right?
No, it was not just me. I work with our building principal, our school psychologist for the building, and then there's a team of myself and 2 other classroom teachers. And we work over the summer, each summer, not only last summer looking at coming back from COVID, but every summer we get together and we prepare for a 1-day in-service training for the rest of the staff on what do we want our school culture and our school climate to feel like, and how do we make that happen for the start of the school year. Last year's meeting was much different than any of our other meetings that we've had with staff, as we had to consider all of those different aspects of social distancing and making up for that change in routine and change in learning that our students experienced from the closures during COVID, and now having all the different learning pathways and how to accommodate for that. But our building principal is very aware of making sure that when we are planning for these things, that he includes someone from each one of our departments. So we always have myself as the PBIS building coach, who is a middle grades teacher, but then we also pull in an elementary teacher and a secondary teacher. And we make sure that we're addressing the needs of all of the students at different grade levels, at different areas of needs. And we have all of those different minds working together, which helps us to look at things with those different educational perspectives, because teachers who are working with a 12th grade student look at things very differently than someone who's working with a 6th or a 3rd grade student. So having all of those different perspectives is very helpful.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And what a nice thing that you thought vertically, to connect with the elementary and the high school. Very smart, very smart. Thank you so much. Is there one more thing in the chat maybe? Deshay said followed up with you for something for you, if you see that.
Oh, yes. Yes. And so when I had them thinking about one student, one scholar that they were going to think about their interactions with, I noticed chatter because with the group, there's always those little side conversations, and I could hear talk of some of our strongest students who follow the expectations the most easily, and I discouraged them from choosing those as the scholars that they're going to focus on because I wanted them to give themselves room for growth. As we were presenting the school year to the students, we wanted them to focus on the growth mindset and the ability to make progress, and that things aren't always easy and you're going to struggle and you're going to grow. And I encouraged our staff to do the same. So choosing someone who maybe knows how to push that button for you, or someone who you have to prompt 5 times before they get their pencil out of their pencil box, or okay, so how can I change that and how can I improve? What could I do differently? And I even noticed with that, some of our staff, before they even took their own baseline data, were improving because they knew they were going to be taking that baseline data and just being more self-aware of what's coming out of our mouth and what our facial expressions are saying, and all of that really made a difference in the relationships that they had with their students.
Yeah, that's where I was just going to go. I wonder if it probably had a really nice side effect of, changing some of the relational piece of the work they were doing. So that's really fantastic. Thank you so much. Anything else for Valerie? Or Valerie, anything else you'd like to share?
I don't think I don't see any other questions or thoughts in the chat. I don't have any additional things to add at this very moment. Does anyone else have something they'd like to ask, or a story they'd like to share with us about that connects to any of these 3 components? Our class sizes range from 6 to 10 students.
Wow.
We're a very high need population. All of the students who are in our building are unable to behaviorally succeed in the general education buildings. So we pull from all of our elementary schools. There are referrals to our program through the IEP process from all of our elementary schools, our middle school, the intermediate high school, and the senior high school. And we provide them with that full-time emotional support services in that very small setting in one building.
Do you see that last question?
I think for implementing these strategies in a general education setting, if we go back and we look at, I can go back in my presentation, where I list the 3 components together. It's going to be different based on the size and the scale of your population. And in the general education setting, you're obviously not going to be able to collect the same amount of data in that setting, but you can still collect data. You can use those classroom-based assessments. You can use just participation in class and engagement to gauge where students are at and take note of where they're at. Increasing praise and rebuilding student confidence is really, it comes down to that the communication with the students and building those relationships with the students. Sometimes I think in the general education setting, it's difficult to form a meaningful relationship with every student, and maybe you don't have the opportunity to do that because of time constraints. But can you do it with 50% of your students? Can you focus on having a meaningful personal relationship with one student a day? How can you make that work in your classroom is going to be different for everyone. As far as the praise to redirection ratio, I had teachers and and paraprofessional staff trying to get to a 4-to-1 ratio. So 4 positive verbal interactions for every 1 redirection or correction.
And I think that's actually a connection to research to that 4-to-1 ratio. And honestly, number 1 and number 2 off the top of my head, and it's been a while, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, can be found quite, evident in PBIS in tiers 1, let alone tiers 1, 2, and 3. I'm not sure what 3 looks like specifically, but in terms of your general ed population, that is kind of, those are principles that lend themselves to benefiting all students, obviously. So I want to thank you so much for sharing this information. I really appreciated hearing 3. I hope others did too. Anything else for Valerie? We can come back to her at the end, but I do want to honor our next group of folks who are here with us. And I think I saw them on my screen all sitting together. There they are. That's not Mike Morgan. Hey, there he is. There he is. Okay, nice to see everybody from Northern Potter Children's School. And I think maybe somebody from Seneca Highlands might be there. I'm not sure. I'm going to ask you to begin maybe by introducing yourselves before you do your presentation or offer us your presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're Northern Potter Children's School. I'm Mike Morgan, the principal, and I have my other fine team members with me. I'll let them introduce themselves. I was going to introduce them, but I think you need to hear their voices.
I'm Mary Kitch and I teach 3rd grade.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Hoban and I teach 4th grade.
And I'm Jamie Slauson. I was 5th grade at the beginning of the year and I transitioned into the math intervention teacher partway through last year.
And hi, I'm Nicole Meyer. I'm a Seneca Highlands IU9 TAC.
And Mike, are you going to be able to share your screen?
Yeah.
Down at that, no, go back to the Zoom.
Sure.
Nope, go back to the Zoom.
Lots of support behind you.
Yeah.
Our boss is
Right there. Nope, down at the bottom, the Zoom. Right there, yep. Pull her back up. Now down at the bottom of that screen. Where it says, yep. And then choose the Google Slide that you have open. The internet, yep. No.
Oh,
We see that the Zoom meeting was launched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You click on the slides now at the bottom.
Click on slides. The next tab over at the top.
Jamie should be sitting there.
Yep. Now go preview.
There we go.
Preview. Right. Yep. Present. There you go.
Boom.
Oh,
There we go. Thank you. We can see it now.
thank you. Well, we went through introductions, and I'm going to give you kind of a quick overview of the demographics here. I just wasted 5 minutes trying to scroll through share the screen. We are a small school district located in north central Pennsylvania, roughly 231 square miles. 100% of our students are bused into the district, into the schools. We do have 1 building each devoted to the elementary school, which includes 4-year-olds all the way up to grade 6. And we do have a junior middle school, high school set up with 7th through 12th grade. You can see we do have a high percentage of our students who are on free and reduced lunch, albeit with certain government regulations now which permit us to offer everyone free lunches. But with that students qualifying for free and reduced lunch, we're drawing in students who obviously are living out far from our district and who don't have are coming from homes that are really understanding like kind of the future of what their children have. 24% of our students right now, and this is part of one of the reasons we began to look at MTSS, and especially in math, is because 24% of our students were qualifying for special education services. So without further ado, I want to pass off to our team. I want to mention too that we had significant help in facilitation in this process from Jared Campbell from Bataan, and Also, we have a member of our team who can't join us today. His name's Jared Davis. He was a 6th grade math teacher this past year. So.
Okay, again, I'm Nicole Meyer from IU9. I'm a TAC. And first of all, I want to start with recognizing Northern Potter for their hard work and their great effort in implementing MTSS last year, or at least the beginning stages of it, especially during a pandemic year. To take that on within a year of unknowns was huge. And they've truly brought their students a long way, and you're going to hear that from the rest of the team here shortly. But what led Northern Potter to the MTSS grant was that prior to the school closure last year, Mr. Morgan and his team started to discuss, like he mentioned, the special education evaluations, the high need there, and the need to decrease the gap of student math skills. Unfortunately, the gap was increasing and not decreasing. So that led them to start discussing what they could do to meet those individual needs. Well, then, of course, we all were sent home in March. And just a little after that, the opportunity of the grants came out from Patton. So that was forwarded on to Mr. Morgan, and he noticed that there was an MTSS math grant. And looking at that, he knew, along with his team, that they were missing a systematic framework for the whole entire elementary level. So it wasn't just a particular grade level, it was something that was needed throughout the building. They were currently using the Eureka math curriculum, and they had about approximately 4 years into it, but they just found that there was some more need for some evidence-based math interventions. So in looking at the grant, they felt that was the perfect opportunity to receive some more PD and to have that support from Patton to help implement the MTSS framework. So that's basically what led them into the MTSS. Let Jamie take over.
All right, so in looking at our first steps, we first had our training with Patton, led by Jared Campbell, along with Erica and Maggie, his consultants. And we had to establish our leadership team, and we chose to have a broad range of teachers. We had teachers grades 3 to 6 represented. We had our IU9 consultant with us. We had the 3 consultants from Patan, as well as administration and our guidance counselor. And once that team was established, we went into looking at our strengths and weaknesses using a fidelity checklist that Patan sent to us to look at our math instruction and also our interventions. As we went through the checklist, we found that we needed that systematic approach, so we decided to implement Spring Math. Spring Math brought us a class-wide intervention as well as an individual intervention process that we could use. So we actually implemented that starting in October. My position was vacant at the beginning of the year. And so for the math intervention position, I actually continued in my 5th grade math teaching role until we found a replacement for me into mid-February. So I did kind of a dual position where I assisted teachers in getting the Spring Math up and running. We met to do the fidelity checklist, but I really didn't start the actual position until mid-February. And then the first thing that we looked at was implementing the walkthroughs, where I checked the fidelity of not only our Eureka math instruction, but also looking at the implementation of Spring Math at that point, so that we could use that data to work forward and come up with our next steps.
So I'm going to speak, this is Mary Kitch, a 3rd grade teacher, and I'm going to speak to Spring Math. This was a new program for us. We had no experience or training in it. We did have universal screeners prior to using this, but it did not provide class-wide or individual interventions. And that was one of the things that attracted us to this specific program. We have implemented it from grades K through 6. The teachers have been very involved in organizing the material. And one of the highlights is it does class-wide interventions. So daily, students are getting class-wide interventions.
And the class-wide interventions that Mary was speaking of, this past year, we implemented that within our math blocks. So at the start of our math block, we would have, depending on where our students as that class scored, Spring Math was able to tell us whether they were going to be using a peer tutor model or a teacher model, depending on the weekly data. So that was really, as 4th and 3rd grade teachers, and true, Jared in 6th grade, I think all of our teachers would agree, it was phenomenal to see our higher level kids being able to talk about the math, and then the growth that both students were able to show when they were working together. Within that, there was a independent practice, there was an error correction piece, and there was different motivation that was tied with it. And although we were all implementing it, I would say fairly consistently from whenever we started in October, everybody's motivation piece was a little bit different depending on the grades. And we think that worked out too, but it was very consistent and with student increases. And then whenever they would move on to a skill, there was another motivation attached to each piece.
Some of the additional resources and interventions that we used, we had different grade levels utilizing extra math. So in extra math, that's basically just focusing on your math act practice. So there were students and individuals that needed that. So some of our grade levels leveraged extra math. Grades 3, 4, and 5 use Zearn. Zearn was basically just an electronic version of our Eureka Math curriculum. And then looking at ST Math and Prodigy based on the grade level, our younger grades K to 2 were using ST Math as well as 3 in some instances. And then 4, 5, and 6 were utilizing Prodigy to reinforce skills. So our math technology was a great piece to give our students a little bit of extra practice. But looking at some of our tier 2 kids, like they needed a little bit more support. So that's where we brought in peer tutors. We had some 5th and 6th grade students that had a little bit of a flexibility in time, whether it was in the morning during our breakfast or at the end of the daytime during like a chorus or band. And they would go and pull some of our younger students, K to 3, to do some drill sandwiches with them. They also practiced some of their class-wide interventions with them to give them a little additional practice for the teachers. Some students, we found that there were a lot of reversals in their numbers. So we started implementing our some Davis strategies with them, where they were using clay for the formation of numbers. And we went through trying to remove some of those triggers. During our ELO, it's our extra learning opportunity. Students were pulled into small groups. And during that ELO, they could be working on individual interventions. They might be working in a small group to reinforce a math concept in class, or even to pre-teach or teach a skill to kind of give a little bit of an enrichment into the math curriculum. And sometimes it was a skill that, you know, maybe the 2nd grade teacher said, hey, you know, I'm not sure I'm going to get to geometry. Could you do a mini unit on geometry with all of 2nd grade? You know, so I was able to pull those 2nd graders in small groups to go through some of those concepts. And lastly, our IU consultant and our Patan support has been immensely resourceful in giving us curriculum ideas, manipulative ideas, also research-based curriculum or resources, just to give us a little bit more support for our students and our math instruction.
Before I switch to the next slide, I would just want to say that Jamie was real instrumental as our math intervention teacher / coach in pulling all of these resources and interventions together. I mean, all of these things that you see here, you might, I as administrators could say, you know, that everybody was doing these things, but we didn't really have a systematic approach and in terms of a program and understanding how we could pull those ideas together. Having Jamie on board really kind of brought some cohesiveness to that whole process. When you're assigning peer tutors, it wasn't just a matter of, you know, sending your troubled student out of the room for 10 minutes to work with a peer tutor. It was really based on what the data was showing us in terms of what type of drill sandwich or what type of technology or what was supposed to be done at that time. So I gave a little extra practice to maybe a younger student who needed that additional practice, but it also reinforced some of the skills for the older students who were acting as peer tutors. So it really was planned and purposeful in its approach. It wasn't just a haphazard, hey, you go out here today, you need practice with your addition facts, your subtraction facts. It was really based on and driven by the data that Jamie was looking at and what the teachers knew, because the teachers were seeing the same data as what Jamie was. It was just an additional support and making sure that those things were happening for kids.
So in looking at our data, in implementing the class-wide interventions, they're basically identifying skills that, you know, kindergarten needs to know by the end of the year, first grade, second grade, and so forth. Our data, we were so impressed with our kindergarten through second grade classes. 4 out of the 6 completed all of the class-wide interventions in the first year, and then the 2 remaining were on their final skill. We just ran out of time in the year. So we felt that that was a huge accomplishment, not only in their work ethic, but also in how hard these kids worked, because they were so excited to master these skills and to move on to the next level. And it was really great to see. And looking at the individual interventions, as I said, I started the position in mid-February, and through the end of May, we had 68 students that were identified for an individual intervention. So that means that they needed an additional 5 to 15 minutes a day where they worked on a specific skill that was identified by Spring Math. They printed out a very specific individual lesson plan for each of those students. By the end of the year, 20 of our students were able to exit based on mastery. So we felt that was a great accomplishment, being that we only really started to get the ball rolling in February. So it's my hope that next year, you know, knowing that we still have 48 students, you know, we can really start working strategically with them and work to get to mastery on the skills that they're missing.
And again, speaking as the administrator, and this would be even for some curriculum people out there, I mean, not only were these students identified, but it clearly identified what skills they needed and what interventions would be provided. And Jamie's right. Had we known what we know now back in September, we're fairly confident that we would have been able to minimize that number exiting, or I'm sorry, maximizing that number that exited based on mastery. And so we're kind of looking forward to what this year lies ahead, because we'll have our intervention teacher full-time starting day 1. And everyone's kind of is bought in, so they're kind of excited to see what we're going to do this year. So,
just one thing with our next steps, Mary and I were talking before this started, and being that we did just implement Spring Math this past, like mid-year, we had talked how, like, normally whenever you implement something, there are things that you want to change. You didn't get it right the first time, you're like, eh. And we had both talked, it is so well laid out. And the system that we have, like, we don't feel the need to change anything with how we implemented it or how we distributed the paper or managed the papers. It was so easy to implement right off the bat as teachers who were new to the program. Jamie was phenomenal with the copies that we needed, and she had spoke about how the different students were identified, and sometimes she would be able to pull a group that was working on the same skill. And sometimes, because everything was so laid out for the week of individual interventions with that child, I was able to pull them just in extra time that I had during my day. I'm sure you were too. So it was just so teacher friendly,
Right.
and like we just can't speak enough about it. It was phenomenal. But our next steps. So we feel very fortunate that we did get approved for a second year of the MTSS grant, because this year was just so up in the air. So we feel really good about being able to do this for a second year and really dive into it, hopefully in a more normal year.
And one of the things that we learned implementing it this year, Jamie had shared how K through second, their data was amazing. Well, third through sixth was not as amazing. There were things but one of the big takeaways was in the data really supported this. In K through 2, they were heterogeneously grouped, but in 3 through 6, we were homogeneously grouped. So our top groups did phenomenal. They made a lot of growth and they progressed through the steps. The bottom groups did not. So next year, one of the things we're going to do, or we have already in place, is they're going to be heterogeneously grouped. So the top and the bottom kids will be working together, and we expect to see more growth through that.
In addition, more students identified, because it was
Yes.
harder for in the lower groups for it to identify students who were.
Because they're all working at the same place.
They're
Yes.
working in the same place.
So we're very excited about that. In kind of with that, Mr. Morgan worked really hard on our schedule, and he kind of gave us everything we asked for. So this next year we have adjustments to our ELO block. Our ELO block is that extra learning opportunity. So we use it for some enrichment. We use it for some math intervention. We use it for some reading intervention. And sometimes those same kids are going kind of everywhere. So we looked at our data, we kind of looked at our kiddos and our staff, and he kind of worked his magic. And now we have a separate ELO to kind of deal with math or ELA. And then we have an extended block where we'll do our core instruction, we'll do our spring math in there, which will allow for the whole class to be heterogeneously grouped. And no, that was all.
Yellow
That was the three.
specific with
Yes.
pull out.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was cool. Mhm.
Yes.
So we're really excited about that too.
So one of the other things that we implemented, I believe it's been at least 2 years ago, is we have grade level data meetings. We did this as a part of our differentiated supervision plan to start with. And it was wonderful because I got to see things 4th grade and 5th grade and 6th grade were doing. And we talked about, that was part of it. We got to visit each other's classes, but just talking about the vocabulary and where students are at and what we saw was invaluable. We really feel that that's a great part of bridging the gaps, is learning where each other are at with our teaching and what kinds of things students need to know at the different grade levels. We hope to expand that to the lower grade levels as well, for them to be able to visit other classrooms and see, again, the vocabulary and this teaching and how the curriculum spirals up.
Even parts that maybe aren't a huge focus for me in 4th grade, but I got to see how it completely affected 5th grade. And that was because we're all kind of focused on what we need. Like we were kind of hyper focused on, okay, I know I need to do this, but some of the littler pieces on how it's going to affect them in the later grades, it was truly amazing to be able to do. And then we're just going to definitely continue with spring math. And like I said earlier, we feel ready, like we feel ready for it. And we're very excited to see how it works now that we will all be heterogeneously grouped.
Yes.
Thank you so much, all of you from Northern Potter Children's School and IU9, Nicole from IU9. This was a fantastic introduction into your work, your hard work with spring math, with your school, to benefit your students. That intervention program, we don't often utilize an intervention program at Patton, right? This one, spring math, is I put in some information in the chat, is created by Dr. Amanda Vanderheiden. So she's very well known in the math world. Very evidence-based and incredibly comprehensive as an intervention program. Lots of training comes with this. I'm sure Nicole is very well suited to support you all from the IU, as there are most of our IUs have gone through training around spring math, because it is such an intensive and beneficial intervention for math for students. So again, if you're interested, there is a link in the chat. There's also, you could reach out to a math consultant at Patton, or probably your IU at this point, who could give you even some more information regarding it and how it fits into MTSS very well. Also, we put in some links related to MTSS resources, of which there are many, 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 many. On the Patton website, I put in the link, one specifically, I think, to the readiness tool. There are just so many. So that should give you at least a place to begin if you're interested. Any other questions specific? Thank you, Silky. More information as well from Silky. Thank you so much that she put in the chat. You might want to check that out and grab that link as well. Any questions specifically for Northern Potter Children's School, for the team or for the IU? Okay, so again, this presentation will be available probably within a week or so. If you'd like to go back and revisit the information that was shared, their presentation is already available and under the handouts for this session. Thank you for that. You did a tremendous job. It's very hard to speak for 20-25 minutes about something that you put so much into at the system level as well as the teacher level. So I really want to thank you for your time. We can't wait to see what's happening. Maybe we'll hear how things are going next year. Again, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be in touch. I appreciate it very much. In the chat, for those of you who are interested in earning Act 48, I just put in the code. As you know, you need the code for every session. Also put in the code for the credit verification survey. That's the link to the survey that must be completed just once at the very end of the whole leadership summit. Again, just to kind of reiterate some information for you, Act 48 is being awarded to participants who attend the full afternoon today and or the full morning on Tuesday and or the post-conference on Tuesday afternoon, which goes till 3:30. So that was very nice that you don't have to attend everything if in fact you can't do that, but you can still earn some hours toward your Act 48. In order to earn that Act 48, again, that link that I put in there to the survey must be completed. That's your credit verification survey by Friday, August 6th. So that's 2 Fridays. And again, only completed once. It will be open at the end of the summit after the post conference sessions tomorrow at 3:30. So at 3:30, you can open that link to get to the credit survey if you'd like, one of those people who'd just like to get it done right away. Again, I want to remind you to go to the summit agenda. You can use those same links in the chat to click on a Zoom link to attend your next session. And again, thank you to Butler, Valerie, and to the whole Northern Potter Children's School team and Nicole from IU9 for sharing their experiences with all of us today. Remember that you can refer back. Oh, I already said that part. See, that's what happens when you take copious notes. Remember, we'll be putting that presentation up soon. So everybody, please enjoy the rest of your leadership summit. Thank you and goodbye.